the remarkable reaction across the United States to the assassination of an executive of a health insurance company. And that linked to the collapse of governments in France, South Korea, and Syria, to the explosion of labor militancy and strikes, above all in the last few weeks, the hundreds and thousands of workers in the Volkswagen Corporation in Germany, the powerhouse auto company that has been at the center of German economic growth. So I want to show you that they're linked and how they're linked and what the lesson is we need to draw from those linkages. So here we go. I want to begin with the threat of incoming President Trump that he may slap huge tariffs, even 100%, on nations. He mentioned the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, if they do things he doesn't like, threaten the value of the dollar, or engage in any other kind of economic activity typical and normal to a developing country, but to the dislike of Mr. Trump. I want to make sure you all understand that President Trump, who's a Republican, therefore a member of the party that has distinguished itself for the last 100 years being opposed to taxes. The government shouldn't tax. We should keep that money and be able to spend it as we see fit rather than have to hand over a lot of it to the government over and over, repeated. This Republican, conservative, or worse, is doing what? He's hitting the world with tariffs. He's a tax man. He's a Republican who is advocating big, fat, heavy taxes. And as I have explained before, tariffs are taxes paid by Americans. If you want to bring a good or a service into the United States that is produced elsewhere, that's when you have to pay a tariff. It's a tax. And you know who gets it? Uncle Sam. So it's a classic tax. Why would a Republican anti-tax president be in favor of massive new taxes? Because he's in a jam and he doesn't want to do anything else. He doesn't want to borrow the money. He certainly doesn't have the courage to tax corporations and the rich. They're the ones that donate to get him in there. So what's he going to do? He's going to tax you and me, isn't he? Yeah, he is. And we're fighting back in lots of ways. One of the ways is that foreign countries are going to make a decision if he actually does this stuff. You know what they're going to decide? And here I'm not talking so much about foreign governments. I'm talking about foreign private companies. You know, in Germany or France or Italy or Spain or Africa or Asia or Latin America, they're going to cut back sales in the United States. You know why? They don't want to be subject to tax. They don't want to be able to sell a lot of cars one day and many fewer the next day. Why? Because some president like Trump has whacked a tariff on there. Because whatever the thing costs to bring into America, a tariff raises the cost to the rest of us because we got to pay that tax called a tariff on those goods. So they're going to want to sell to countries not threatening them with tariffs. And you know what those countries are? Most of the rest of the world. We are watching rhetorical gestures. May look good on the evening news, but they are isolating the United States, and that's one of the themes you're going to see carried through. The next update for today has to do with the New Seasons Market. It's a supermarket chain in the Portland, Oregon area. They have been fighting for a union contract. It's about 1,000 workers now, spread across 11 outlets of this supermarket chain. They had a one-day strike the day before Thanksgiving. They had another one-day action back in September. They started trying to unionize back in 2022, and they were quickly able to get a union there. And then they discovered that under American labor law, companies can stall off. Here we are at the end of 2024, and they still don't have a contract. They got a union. They got overwhelming support for the union. But that's typical in the United States. You suffer, you struggle, you get a union, and then you discover that the employer has other ways to stiff you by making you wait. And of course, while you wait, by the way, the typical takes typically 500 days from the time that the National Labor Board certifies you as a union to the first contract you get. And that's just because your employer has every incentive to take advantage of the law and not work something out. In other countries, they don't permit that. That's an American achievement. And it makes the workers angry and bitter. They have to reorganize all over again because over a 2-year period, some workers leave that job for their own personal reasons. And new workers come in who weren't part of the struggle to get the union. You have to bring them up to speed. The employer will tell them all kinds of stories. You can see how this works. So there's labor struggle all over the United States. The companies don't want to meet their workers halfway, or a quarter of the way, or any way at all. Let me turn then to the other events that I'm going to show you are linked. Suddenly, the leader of France finds himself in a dubious position. He's the incumbent, Emmanuel Macron. He won the election last time with a big majority. It's all gone. He has an election a few weeks ago, and he comes in third out of 3. Not good. Not only does he come in third out of 3, but his party has a tiny minority of votes and seats in the parliament. The biggest majority, not an absolute majority, a plurality, in the parliament in France, as I'm speaking to you, is the left wing, a unity of 4 parties. The French Communist Party, the French Socialist Party, the French Green Party, and the biggest of them all, France Unbowed. Together, they are the biggest bloc of deputies in the parliament. They're all one kind of socialist or another. Then the second biggest bloc of votes is the extreme right wing, often called fascist, of Marine Le Pen. The president, the guy in the middle, he comes in third out of 3. He doesn't have much at all. But he doesn't see the writing on the wall. When do politicians ever do? So he forces one of his own choices to be the new prime minister, despite the fact that he doesn't have the majority in the parliament. He only can do that because the right wing says, we'll vote for you as long as you do what we want you to. And he's so desperate to hold on to power that he agrees to that. And then he submits, through his prime minister that he named, a budget. And now watch. It's sort of like the people who run the New Seasons Market, or like Mr. Trump. He squeezes. He cuts back spending on the mass of the French people and raises taxes on them. A little bit like Mr. Trump is doing, although he doesn't use tariffs. He uses domestic spending and domestic taxation. And guess what? the right wing says, we're not supporting this. The left wing says, you must be kidding. And so, a few days ago, in the French parliament, the two sides, the left wing, that's the biggest bloc of deputies, members of parliament, and the right wing, together vote what's called in France no confidence, and the government collapses. And as I'm speaking to you, as of now, we don't know yet what Mr. Macron, who's the president and therefore one step removed, what he's going to do. But his days are numbered. His government has collapsed. And why? Because he's trying to squeeze the working class, just like Mr. Trump is with his tariffs, and just like the owners and operators of the new season's market are trying to do. Class struggle at home, class struggle abroad. That's what ties all of these together. But we're not done. We have other things to tie together, which we're now going to turn to and do. Over the last couple of weeks, over 100,000 workers in Germany who work for the VW Corporation, Volkswagen in Germany. They've been on strike at 9 plants, started December 2nd. Why? The company wants to close 3 factories, laying off thousands of workers for the first time, closing factories in the 87-year history of the VW Corporation. They also propose a pay cut. Pay attention, my fellow Americans, because what we're talking about is coming here, sooner or later, and right now, the money is being bet on sooner. A 10% cut. That's right. They're going to fire and lay off thousands of workers while cutting the salaries of everybody by 10%. What in the world is going on? And the German workers are saying, oh, no, you don't. They're fighting back. You threaten us with 10% cuts? You threaten us with thousands of layoffs? You do it nicely just before Christmas? Oh, no. Oh, no. And you know what we're going to get in Germany? What we got? Class struggle between the corporate leaders and the mass of working people. I'm going to continue and talk about the assassination of that executive and show you the linkage and the collapses in South Korea and Syria. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, friends, to the second half of today's economic update. Before picking up the story of the collapse of the French government, I want to let you know that we have a copy of our most recent book, Understanding Capitalism, now available in a hardback, limited, linen-bound edition. And as part of our fundraising effort, we will be signing these, autographing these for you, if you are interested, as part of the seasonal fundraising that we are required, of course, to do. If you are interested, as we hope you are, please let us know by sending us an email to info@democracyatwork.info and put the words limited edition in the title. And we'll get back to you with the details on how to order such a special limited edition signed copy. Okay, I want to go back to the collapse of the French government and tell you that it is very closely linked with the strike of the VW workers in Germany. Why? Well, in a way, the French government has been struggling with something that has collapsed its popular support. It has been spending a lot of money on the war in Ukraine, and it has been whining and complaining enormously about competition from China. And exactly those issues are the ones raised by the owners of the VW Corporation in explaining why they want to lay off thousands of workers and why they want to cut 10% off the wages of one of the largest labor forces in the country, of Germany. They're complaining about Chinese competition. Well, let's be clear. Every company that has ever been outcompeted by another company has found a way to blame the other company, to scream that something is unfair, to put every kind of blame on everyone and everything they can think of, except, of course, themselves. VW did not understand the global transition to electric vehicles. The Chinese did. And the Chinese went ahead, like the Americans and many others, working on producing the best quality, lowest price electric vehicle in the world. The Chinese won that competition. The French lost. The Americans lost. What are the Americans doing? Going to the president to get tariffs. We have a 100% tariff against Chinese electric vehicles in the United States, making them too expensive for Americans. All that the Germans are doing is saying, okay, we're not going to work on electric vehicles, but we don't have to pay the cost. We want to take it out of our workers. 10% less for all of you gives us the money to catch up on our failure to compete successfully. What else is it that the VW owners are not telling them? The cost of energy in Germany went up crazily. Why? Just when the war in Ukraine broke out. And why is that? Because the Germans were pressured by the Americans, with whom they are very close, to slap sanctions on Russia and to stop buying Russian oil and gas. Well, guess what, Americans? Russian oil and gas, the best, closest, cheapest source of energy Germany could hope for, is no longer available to Germany. Germany refuses to buy it. It has to turn to the U.S. to buy much more expensive liquefied natural gas. And so the price of the VW goes up and it loses customers. And they want to fix all that. Why and how? To deal with their own failure? To deal with the mistake they may have made in the Ukraine war? No. They want to take it out of the German working class, and the German working class won't have it. They're fighting back, and that strike is going on, and it's bitter, and it's stimulating strikes everywhere else. Guess what that's called? Class struggle in Germany. Now let me turn to two other phenomena. The collapse of a government literally overnight in South Korea, and another one in a week or two, that's all it took, in Syria. Well, think of those countries as caught up in a changing world economy, but they're the weakest link in that chain link fence we call the world economy. They can't handle the struggle that's evolving between the United States and the G7, old, wealthy European part of the world economy that's shrinking and dying, and the rising new powerhouse, China, the BRICS, and all of that. We talk about this on the program often, and you know about it. Well, there are countries having to figure out how to navigate between them. Among those countries, Syria and South Korea. If you put the pressures that they're facing, the South Koreans are an economic powerhouse in Asia. But they're being squeezed by Chinese competition. China's a much bigger country, of course, and by the demands of the United States. The biggest rumor circulating in South Korea to explain the collapse of their government. Literally the decision one day out of the blue of their leader to declare martial law, to cancel the parliament, to take the most undemocratic steps imaginable, only to have the government say, no, 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 you're not doing that to us. We're doing it to you. You're out of here, which is what they did. And what was the rumor? The rumor was the United States wanted the South Koreans to ship an enormous amount of munitions to the Ukraine, because the United States has shipped about as much as it can without threatening its own military situation. And the Europeans likewise. So they're squeezing the South Koreans. But the South Koreans, how are they going to survive? They have a government that has to take care of its people, that can't keep demanding more taxes from its people. And now they have to ship an expensive load of their own product to the Ukraine as some sort of what? Gift? When this idea was floated, the majority in the Korean parliament said, no way is this happening. What is the president going to do? Dissolve parliament? He tried. He failed. In Syria, same thing. Caught up not only in a changing world economy, Syria is a small, poor country, but torn apart because it's literally between Israel on one hand and Ukraine on the other. They're caught up in the Middle Eastern turmoil, in the Ukraine war turmoil. There's no way out. They can't function. Its economy is partly controlled by the Kurdish people, partly by influence of Erdogan in Turkey, partly by Russians, partly by Americans who maintain a presence there. This is impossible. It's a country that has been in a perpetual civil war. They couldn't do it anymore. The contesting, struggling blew them out of the water. One of the groups, jihadis, parts of that Islamicist movement around the world, took the initiative and showed that the government was barely functioning. And if you push at it a little bit, it'll keel out, it'll keel over. And then there's this remarkable event you might have thought was unconnected, just like you thought those other events were unconnected, but they're not. Here I'm talking about the assassination one morning recently on the streets of New York City of an executive of United Healthcare by an unknown, at least at this point, an unknown assailant who shot and killed this executive. Beyond the personal tragedy of such a situation, which I don't need to comment on, what is important, much more important than the event itself, is what the reaction has been. The overwhelming reaction of the American people expressed in social media, which is where we find out how Americans think. At least we find out what they honestly think because they have the protection of the anonymity of social media. The overwhelming majority of people understand and sympathize with what has been presented as the likely motive of this assassination. Those words written on the shell casings: delay, deny, defend. They're obvious references to the bitter anger reflected in those social media of the American people who have been going through for years experiences, I've had them myself, of struggling after we have a problem with an injury or an illness, struggling with the insurance company as it adds insult to our injury by nickel and diming us about coverage. And so the people expressed their anger. This moment, this act on the street of New York galvanized, provoked, liberated, we might say, the feelings of the American people of rage because they know they're being ripped off. They know that the first priority of the United Healthcare and all the other companies is profit. How do they know it? Because the companies say so. Their first priority isn't helping you through the trauma of an illness or an injury you can't afford to deal with. No, no, no. The proof of it is so obvious, I'm actually going to give it to you anyway. It's another company, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. A few days before the assassination happened, they announced, to the astonishment even of those of us who know how sad the situation is, that they were going to decide how many hours of anesthesia you get if you need surgery. Because they're not happy with the amount of reimbursement they have to give to the anesthesiologist who attends your surgery to manage the anesthesia. They don't want to spend that money, do they? Why? Because if they can spend less on anesthesia while charging everybody the same medical premium, well, their profits go up. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? So they propose to cut the anesthesia. You could have an image, if you're a comedian, about being woken up in the middle of your surgery saying, you've run out of anesthesia, Jack. You want some more, or you want to writhe in pain? I mean, within hours after the assassination, Anthem withdrew its proposal. It understands the rage of the people. It understands it the way you understand it when you're the cause of it. American people were reacting against being ripped off, just like the workers in Germany's VW, just like the people in France reacting to Macron, just like the grocery workers in Portland, Oregon, and just like those in America beginning to understand what Trump and tariffs are all about. Yeah, it's about class struggle, and it's coming to a head because the old leadership of the capitalist system is in ever deeper difficulty, trouble, and decline. And all of these are symptoms of that process. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to speaking with you again next week.